Everyone. You'll be muted to start with. My name is Jen Rowe. I am chair of the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization's Process Engagement and Readiness Committee, also known as TIPR. I'll now call this meeting to order. And we will roll into the next. We have a few items to kind of work through at the beginning of every meeting. First of which is a notice of discrimination. But maybe we might be frozen. Okay. Moment. There we go. All right. So you're invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. And this meeting is also accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, Level AA standards, and revised Section 5.8 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Adriana Jacobson. Maybe Adriana can wave. Yeah, there you go. MPO staff. At ajacobsen@ctps.org or 857-702-3663, or you can also use the chat box. All right, and then just a few guidelines. As I mentioned, participants join the meeting with muted microphones. We do ask that people rename yourself, including your first name, your last name, and your affiliation. After the roll call, we will have board members will be able to mute and unmute themselves at will. Although we do ask folks to try to remain muted unless actively speaking, just for background noise. And to participate in discussion, you'll use the raise hand function. You can either click on the participants button at the bottom of the screen. A window will pop up with the raise hand button at the bottom, or there's also a reactions button in the toolbar. I, as a chair, will call on participants to unmute. And if you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hands. All right. So with that, we will begin with our roll call. Again, for anyone who just joined, my name is Jen Rowe. I chair this committee and represent the city of Boston and Mayor Michelle Wu. I'll now call upon MassDOT Transportation Seat 1.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Chris Clem. I am new to the TIPR committee. I will be transitioning to the Boston MPO's liaison for Derek Cravat. I am not sure if he typically fills seat 1, but I'm just here to at least absorb at this point in time, but just wanted to introduce myself to folks. Not sure if I should be acting in that official capacity just yet, but here to say hi and learn a little bit more about this committee. Thanks.
We're happy to have you and welcome, and look forward to getting to know you more. Derek does typically fill seat 1, yeah, and don't hesitate to ask any questions. Or excited to get to know you more. I'll call on MassDOT seat 2 now. That's typically John Bichard, and I'm pretty sure he was going to be late today, but that not gotten a chance to flip through. So the hearing. Nothing. Well, if he comes in, I'm sure he'll introduce himself. Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Good afternoon, Eric Barassa with MAPC.
Eric, thanks. Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Leonard here, and I'm at work. It's a little noisy in the break room, so I'm sorry about that.
Thanks, Len. Town of Brookline.
Good afternoon, Erin Chute, representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green, the Commissioner of Public Works in Brookline. Glad to be here. Glad to see everyone. We had a little hiatus there, and Chris, welcome.
there and have the gang back together. Town of Arlington. Thought I might have seen John Alessi. Town of Arlington. See, maybe that was incorrect. He did give us a heads up that he was going to be in the field today, so maybe he's either on or off. So we'll move to Inner Core Committee, City of Somerville.
Good afternoon, Jen. Brad Rawson here. I serve as Director of Mobility in Mayor Ballantyne's office and represent the Inner Core Committee on the MPO board. Thanks for bringing us back together.
Thanks, Brad. Now, Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Ciambetti, Metro West.
Thanks, Dennis. And lastly, Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good afternoon, Kristen Guichard from the Town of Acton.
See you. Welcome back. All right. So now we traditionally have a opportunity for public comment. Usually this is at the outset of MPO committee meetings. So we'll provide that opportunity. That said, we also do welcome folks to contribute to the discussion throughout the meeting. So there's no really pressure to do so at this juncture. If you're able to stay on, comment is connected to agenda items. So I will, all right, I see Ryan O'Malley.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just here to speak in support of continued funding of 2 projects in Malden. You're currently in your planning. You have Canal Street, which is a community connection grant, which is S12966, and the related project called the Spot Palm Brook Greenway, which is project number 613088. These projects have received design funding through various Mass Trails grants, a gaming commission grant. We've conducted a number of community engagement meetings through the feasibility study process. And we are currently conducting and have conducted 3 more public meetings as part of the 25% plus design process. We've had some changing over of staff. We are still on schedule. I just wanted to come here and speak in favor and thank you for your support.
Great. Thanks so much, Ryan. Appreciate you coming. Anyone else, members of the public, like to speak at this time? Right. Seeing none. Again, you're welcome to chime in later on in the meeting. But we'll move on to our main agenda item of the day, which is a review of milestones and future meetings for the upcoming federal fiscal year 2026-30 TIP development. As Ethan emailed out, this meeting is a bit of a kickoff to developing the MPO's 5-year capital plan. I will turn it over to Ethan to review some of the trends that we have seen and we've discussed in previous development cycles, and also kind of where we may see those trends continue, place a recap or review of places that this committee has worked with staff and the MPO board, try to make some changes that are already kind of underway as pilots or tests. Midway through, we'll give Ethan a little bit of a break in presenting to do a little exercise. We'll ask you to think about what a successful TIP development would look or feel like to you in 3 different dimensions: results, the process, and relationships. I'll speak more to that later, but I wanted to kind of plant that so you can kind of begin incubating on what that means to you. And then finally, at the end of the meeting, we'll return to Ethan, and he will kind of preview the schedule of TIP development and some key dates and milestones that you might wish to have in mind. So any questions on that agenda before I hand it over to Ethan? All right, Ethan, take it away.
All right, thank you, Jen, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program Manager for the Boston Region MPO. As Jen mentioned, this presentation here today is to be a review of some of the milestones of this upcoming federal fiscal year's 2026 to 30 TIP development process. So thank you all for joining us here today again. This is formally our kickoff for another year of developing transportation improvement program and soliciting projects for it. If we can go on to the next slide, please. I'm going to start off today's presentation by covering some of what we discussed in our last August 22nd meeting of this committee. And we'll also focus today's discussion really around some of the themes that we encountered in last year's federal fiscal year's 2025 to 29 TIP development. We'll break midway through the discussion, or I should say through my presentation here today, to discuss some of those items, specifically because much of what was encountered last year has also been seen in other later prior TIP development cycles as well, such as 2024 to 28, really identifying how we can kind of learn from the lessons that we've seen in recent months and years to try to develop a better TIP process as we go into this next year of capital planning. After that sort of interim discussion, I'll just then briefly cover some of the key TIP dates that members and other municipalities may be expecting this year, including the dates around the TIP application period for the solicitation of new projects, and providing members with some dates not only on upcoming TIP committee meetings, but also when and where MPO board meetings will be utilized as part of the TIP development process until the end of the TIP development process, which is to say, from now, the kickoff, all the way through to endorse. This will include analysis of where we'll be discussing project readiness over the next few months, the scenario development and selection, which for those who are new to the TIP development process refers to how projects are selected and funded through the TIP, and of course the release of the draft TIP document, including the public comment schedule and anticipated date of endorsement. Of course, if folks have any questions, we'll field any discussion there as well. So with that, if we can move on to the next slide and the slide after that to review the content of the most recent August meeting of the TIP committee. At the last committee, the TIP process the TIP process engagement and Readiness Committee reviewed some of the process improvements that are under consideration for the federal fiscal years 2026 to 2030 TIP. There are a variety of different changes proposed here, including the establishment of a better process for transit transformation project applications. Find a little bit of a summary there. The federal fiscal years 2026 to 30 TIP debuts the first run, or I should say the second run of the transit transformation program, but the first case in which a broader selection of different types of transit projects for more years of the TIP will be made available, predominantly through projects offered by the MBTA, Cape Ann Transportation Authority, and the Metro West Regional Transit Authority as well. By soliciting these projects sooner, that provides for more time for MPO staff to score them, to enable additional time to be provided to consider the funding of those projects. We'll then be working with folks from MassDOT Highway Division headquarters and the highway districts to be trialing a quarterly readiness update, which will be provided by MPO staff using information gathered from MPO staff and MassDOT to MPO board members 4 times a year throughout the year on all projects funded within the regional target program that are of particular note to members. We'll also be fomenting MassDOT's existing February TIP Readiness Days exercise with a municipal pre-readiness days in January that will be led by MPO staff, in which municipalities can provide their own feedback into the readiness process, which MPO staff will then aggregate and relay to MassDOT to inform MassDOT's own perspective on the TIP Readiness Days event each February. Also note, one of those quarterly readiness days that I mentioned is that February TIP Readiness Days. In my presentation here today, especially at the very end, I'm going to reiterate some of these changes, and then I'll also list out specific dates where each of these different touch points may occur over this coming year. So with that, if we can move on to the next slide, I want to also kind of refresh some folks' minds on what we discussed at the last meeting around the challenges around the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 TIP development. A lot of the process improvements that were just discussed came forth from years of experiencing certain key items that are recurring issues around developing the TIP, namely with regard to the timeliness of information and the level of detail that is provided when decisions may need to take place. There have been major challenges that the Boston Region MPO and its committees have encountered when attempting to program projects. And it's worth noting right up here at front that the federal fiscal years 2026 to 2030 TIP will likely not see the resolution of all of these issues. Rather, full resolution is going to take some time, but we can still make steps towards improving and making countermeasures to these challenges. This is also a way of adding the caveat that a lot of what the challenges that we're seeing in the last TIP development cycle will likely still reemerge in this TIP development cycle, including project cost increases and delays, an increasing reliance on advanced construction funding, which I'll explain later, and slackened project application volumes. To go into each of these in more detail, if we can go on to the next slide, please. Starting off with project cost increases and delays. To refresh some folks' memories, at the TIP Readiness Days exercise from this past February, the federal fiscal years 2025 to 29 TIP, initially 16 of 28 capital construction projects within the MPO's regionally prioritized programs were recommended for a delay. In addition, a further 8 projects were flagged as at risk for further delays. It's also worth noting that the TIP is a 5-year capital plan, and the majority of those 16 delays fell within the 2 nearest years of the TIP, federal fiscal years 2025 and 26. That's of particular importance because it is less likely, when a delay happens in those years, for a municipally prioritized project to then take their place when funding becomes available. Moreover, even when there was funding surpluses in some years, 13 of 28 projects also saw cost increases above 10%, with several seeing cost increases year over year of anywhere from 20 to 30% even. Many of these cost increases and delays led to a pretty tumultuous TIP development process, which really saw 2 different sides of a spectrum. The first side was a surplus of funding in federal fiscal years 2025 and 26, where there were not any municipally prioritized projects ready to utilize a sudden amount of funding availability, and as the MPO had done in recent TIP development cycles, relied greatly on several transit projects that were not available in time to be scored to utilize that funding, in addition to some projects that were previously funded under MassDOT's statewide highway programs. In addition, with the delays of some projects out of the near-term years into the middle and later years of the TIP, federal fiscal years 2027 and 28 saw deficits in their funding levels, which required further additional delays due to fiscal constraint for several projects, and also jeopardized the opportunity to fund new projects in federal fiscal year 2029. That also then raised the possibility, particularly in federal fiscal year 2027, of needing to potentially remove some projects from the TIP in their entirety. If we can go on to the next slide, for the next challenge that we identified, one of the strategies and countermeasures that was taken with regard to the deficit funding was reliance on advanced construction funding. To explain what advanced construction refers to, it's really a strategy of funding in which the amount of funding that is programmed in a given year of the TIP reflects the construction schedule that a project may have. If a project is going to be constructed over 2 years, rather than funding the project in its entirety at the date of advertisement, that funding may instead be spread out. This isn't an unusual mechanism for other MPOs in the Commonwealth, as other MPOs that may have less regional target balance in a given year but want to fund more projects may rely on this more to help spread out that funding allocation. However, historically, the Boston Region MPO has leveraged advanced construction, given that it has a larger amount of regional target available on the outset compared to smaller MPOs, to focus on larger scale TIP projects, such as the Rutherford Avenue, McGrath Highway, and Western Avenue and Lynn projects that fall within the MPO's major capital infrastructure programs. With that said, some of the recent trends that have emerged with Project Readiness have led to increased reliance on using smaller scale projects under the advanced construction timelines. This began happening really within the development of the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP, but that reliance greatly increased in federal fiscal years 2025 to 29. Specifically, advanced construction funding was the mechanism by which those new projects in federal fiscal year 2029 were funded, as I'll get to on a later slide. Moreover, we've also increased reliance on advanced construction to help to mitigate the deficit in federal fiscal year 2028 by spreading funding on 2028 funded projects into 2029 as well. Again, it's worth noting this is not atypical. All projects that are on the TIP are currently within fiscal constraint. However, as I'll get to, as we look to develop TIPs in the future, further reliance on advanced construction may further constrain our ability to fund new projects. Specifically, as I just mentioned, if we go on the next slide, I listed out some of the actual uses that we chose to deploy advanced construction on. We also, in a very fiscally responsible, I would say, and conservative manner, increased through the MPO board's vote the amount of funding that was being allocated in advance to the McGrath Highway, Rutherford Avenue, and Western Avenue projects, realizing that by funding more funding for these projects in near-term years of the TIP, long-term funding obligations to the projects may be lessened, which could help to increase the amount of project application volumes in future TIPs. That said, that was tempered by the need to move some funding between 2028 and 29, and for a project in 2027 and 28, and also led to the partial funding of new projects in federal fiscal year 2029, with the remainder now coming in this new TIP cycle. Specifically, if we can go on to the next slide, I'm going to present a table here. What this table is it lists a series of projects that are currently funded in federal fiscal year 2029 of the current TIP, but are expected to see additional funding within federal fiscal year 2030 of this upcoming TIP. The first tranche of projects are the reconstruction of Rutherford Avenue in Boston, the McGrath Boulevard construction project in Somerville, and the rehabilitation of Western Avenue in Lynn. These three projects represent the primary long-term, larger-scale funding obligations that the MPO has in the latter years of its TIP for existing projects. These projects currently have a substantial amount of funding in federal fiscal year 2029, but given the size of their budgets, there is further obligation expected for Rutherford Avenue in the amount of $35.5 million in 2030. We expect that based on current cost estimates, the McGrath Boulevard construction project will be fully funded in 2030 with the remaining $5 million of balance. And for the rehabilitation of Western Avenue, there's a similar situation there with the remaining approximately $11 million of balance to be accounted for in that year. This next group of projects then takes us into some of the decisions that were made during last year's TIP development cycle by the MPO board. Starting off with a project that was recommended for a delay out of federal fiscal year 2027 into 2029 based on fiscal constraint. Due to insufficient funding to delay the project in full to 2029, the Woburn roadway and intersection improvements at Town Common project is half funded in 2029 and half funded in 2030 at about $9.3 million in each of those years. For the new projects that were included, including the Ipswich-Argilla Road roadway reconstruction, Bellingham's roadway rehabilitation of Route 126, and the third phase of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail extension in Sudbury, with a little piece in Framingham, those projects are seeing additional amounts of funding pushed into 2030 as well. We then have set-aside funds that need to be considered for the transit transformation and community connections and bike share support funding pools going forward. All in all of these different financial obligations amount to about $84.7 million of funding that is already spoken for in federal fiscal year 2030. As a reminder for those who may be new to the TIP development cycle, last year in federal fiscal year 2029, there was about $160 million of regional target funding available. This is to say that as we go into the next TIP development cycle, we can expect that a little over half, based on current cost estimates and understandings of project schedule, of the regional target funding is already spoken for before we get to any new projects. We can go on to the next slide. On that note of new projects, and don't worry, we have some good news coming because I don't want to leave everybody on a downer. We then have project application volumes. For those members who have been monitoring the TIP for some years, this graph demonstrates the decline of applications in core MPO investment programs and how that has changed since the federal fiscal years 2021 to 25 TIP. When I refer to core investment programs, I'm referring to the investment programs that, based on the apportionments of funding outlined in the MPO's long-range plan, the kinds of investment programs that represent the majority of the funding allocation, specifically complete streets, major infrastructure, bicycle and pedestrian, and intersection improvement projects. What is not included in this list are community connections projects or, given it was the first time it was deployed last year, transit transformation. Going forward, transit transformation projects will be included in this graph. But what we're really seeing here, based on this graph, is a very significant decline over just a few years. For the 2021 to 25 TIP, there were 17 applications submitted for those investment programs. In the 2025 to 29 TIP, there were only 4 applications submitted during that period. That is a very marked decline, but it's worth noting that staff now expect that this will likely stabilize for this upcoming TIP cycle, though we have heard word that there might potentially be actually a slight increase in this mark. That said, it will take some time to ever see a rebound in application volumes to the levels seen in the 2023 to 27 TIP and prior years. Now, how do we hope to try to fix some of these, or at least take steps towards resolving some of these challenges? If we go on to the next slide, this next slide shows a chart indicating some of the challenges that we've indicated that I've just covered, and some of the interventions that we're looking to address. The quarterly readiness updates that I will be laying out later in this presentation are one way that we can look to addressing or mitigating, or at the very least getting an early warning on various project cost increases and delays at more times of the year. That will also help to inform and identify the availability of funding that might be surplus funding, and therefore solicit projects to accommodate that. And it will also help us to identify should any funding constraints or deficits may emerge in later years. The municipal pre-readiness days will also help to serve that same function. For surpluses in early federal fiscal years, the utilization of more proactive transit project solicitation from our partners at the MBTA, MWRTA, and CADA are another way that we can help to mitigate some of that surplus availability, while also making sure that all projects that are being considered by the MPO have been evaluated by the MPO's project evaluation criteria. Moreover, in federal fiscal year 2025, we had the inaugural year of the project design pilot. While there is not any funding carved out for a second round of the design pilot within federal fiscal year 2026 at this time, the project design pilot, and hopefully in later years should it become a long-term fixture of MPO funding, will help to alleviate constraints of funding in later years, provide funding resources that may help to mitigate the prevalence of delays in projects due to difficulties in acquiring funding for design, and also provide resources to really inject funding and support for increased project application volumes to the MPO's investment programs. So we are taking some good steps. Now, if we can go on to the next slide, on that note of positivity, again, we expect that a lot of those challenges that I just went through are going to continue, and we're currently working on deploying some new interventions that will take some years to unfold. Part of this exercise, which I'll link to the chat shortly, is going to ask members to imagine where we may be at in June when we've endorsed the federal fiscal year's 2026 to 30 TIP, and reflecting back on this past TIP cycle and trying to think of what a successful TIP development process will have looked like. So with that, if we can go on to the next slide for the discussion, I'll happily field some questions while I get that feedback board ready.
So I guess maybe, but yeah, both put the board in the chat. Great. So feel free to take a look. There's already several responses because I had emailed this out to members earlier today. But in the meantime, I know Ethan covered a lot of content, and so if we have some kind of initial kind of thoughts, maybe like kind of clarifying questions, separate from this activity, we can take those at first. And Brad, did you have your hand up first?
Yeah, great presentation, Ethan, and thank you, Jen. I just want to underscore something that I just heard Ethan say, which is that some of our mitigation strategies will take a few years to really gain traction and achieve scale. So although we are focused right now on the upcoming TIP cycle, let's all of us and all of our stakeholder groups remember that we're playing the long game here. We are going to move the needle on some of these challenges this year, and others we're going to acknowledge that we're building capacity to move the needle in a more fundamental way the following year, and then again the next year. So thanks for framing it that way, Ethan.
Brad, yeah, that's a very helpful perspective. This is the TIP is a big ship to shift. Len.
Yeah, I guess I am having some questions about the framing though. So do we conclusively know why there has been a decrease in newly proposed projects? Because I was kind of operating under the notion that it was kind of stochastic, meaning that a variety of reasons have come together to cause a decrease in projects, and those reasons could change, and all of a sudden we find ourselves with overabundance of projects. So do we really know why there's been a decrease in newly proposed projects?
Yes, Len, and you're absolutely right. There are a variety of reasons. So while we can't pinpoint one specific one, for one of the predominant issues that has arisen is one, funding availability to support design investment from municipalities. As in Massachusetts, municipalities bear the burden of the majority of the design expenses should they wish to deliver a municipally prioritized project through the MPO, but also at the same coin, recognizing that navigating the design process has also, according to some of the engagement that we've conducted with municipalities in recent years, gotten more difficult due to various permitting requirements or changes in design guidelines that have emerged. There's also the matter of changes in staff turnover that many municipalities witnessed during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. And also, to the point of that design guidelines item, in the effort to create more complete streets, we're also kind of developing more complex projects. They are better projects that, in my opinion, do everything right the first time, but doing so also requires additional time and resources to be made available to really help to realize those investments. So to your point, Len, as well, we recognize that by increasing resources to help to resolve some of these issues that we think have reduced project application volumes, we are also expecting that we will then need to strategize around what happens should there then be a very sudden resurgence of project application volumes that could potentially exceed funding availability.
I'm just going to be press a little bit because the funding levels have been the case all along. So that's kind of nothing new with respect to municipalities. Let me rephrase. Let me go back a little bit. That first reason that you gave had to do with funding. Can you repeat it for me? The first issue.
Yes, one of the factors is that the costs that many municipalities have seen on design have gone up, but moreover, their amount of resources or maybe their purchasing power for design services or for projects may have gone down. Specifically, municipalities often derive their funding either from local appropriations or Chapter 90 funding through the state. And Chapter 90 funding is one of those items that has been, I believe, level funded over many years and may not have kept up with that purchasing power. That is one of the issues we've heard from some of our smaller communities with regard to advancing their designs. Namely, they're either increasingly reliant on town meeting, they're not seeing as much out of their Chapter 9, or not as much purchasing power from Chapter 90, or design costs in general have been going up for them from their consultants due to limited consultants and staff being available to support.
Got you. Thank you. And certainly, the increasing challenge with respect to requirements is an issue. I can imagine. The turnover is not something we can do a lot about. Let me rephrase that. The turnover is something we can't do anything about, and to the extent that that stabilizes municipalities and that may increase the number of proposed projects. And certainly, I agree that constructing street projects or doing complete street projects is a good idea. And to the extent we can encourage more of those, that'd be good. Thank you.
Glenn. Over to Eric.
Thank you. Ethan, thank you. Very good presentation. Can you remind me again, what is the total amount of our target funds in 2030?
So we do not know yet the exact amount of funding, but assuming that the funding is level using the 2029 figure, that was about 161 million, of which about 85 is currently funded against.
Yeah, so 80, so yeah, okay, so 80, less than that million available. And so one of your points here is that we have less flexibility to push projects, into 2030 that are delayed or go up in cost because of so many of the projects are being advanced constructed that we'll assume that. Yeah, to me, the biggest issue I feel like that we've grappled with over the past several years, really since COVID, is just that we've had so many projects just not being ready, and cost increases too. But I feel like the readiness has been the bigger issue, and we've had to push projects out, and then we have this problem where we have this near term, unprogrammed pot of funding, and we don't have any projects that are ready for it, and we're scrambling at the last minute. So to me, A would be we don't have as many projects that need to get, that are not ready and need to get pushed out. But if we do have projects that need to get pushed out, then to me, B would be that we have more time to be able to identify, projects evaluate them, discuss them, have public input into them. And I really, from a process standpoint, very much I want to avoid the situation where we are literally deciding on projects like the day of, or we heard about them the week before, that the highway administration or the T brought to us. I just think that it's just a really bad it's like taking, it's basically throwing out the window everything that we've done to create a project evaluation criteria and a public engagement plan and a process. It's just throwing that out the window if we are making decisions on projects we've heard about for the first time, 1 week before. So that's what I would really like to avoid.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, I just wanted to orient folks that the board, looks like Adriana is sharing, so you can kind of see that folks are putting in some comments with the little by where the plus signs are, and also kind of up or voting other people's comments. And to Eric's point, there are several in the kind of the process category that I think correspond very closely to what Eric was describing. So it's definitely a sentiment that we want. There will be some. We understand that there'll be changes and things that delays that may continue to happen, and yet can we give ourselves a little bit more time? Over to Erin.
Thank you, Jen. So I think that really one of the biggest barriers for municipalities really does come back to the DOT process and staffing and cost. It is such a huge commitment for municipalities to put forward when also they may or may not receive capital funding. And so if there was any way for this committee to potentially help streamline that process for municipalities over time so that it was more accessible, and they really could that they could participate. I think right now it's just a barrier to many municipalities. So it can be tough. But to that end, if we did have other projects that, as Eric was saying, kind of have been properly vetted, they've gone through the process, there's been meaningful public dialogue, and we have sort of a bench of projects that we've already looked at, that when we get to a point where potentially there are dollars that are ready, we've already talked to municipalities on, would you be ready if funding was secured, that potentially we would have some more options when we needed to make very quick decisions on how to utilize, kind of suddenly available dollars. So I would love to see us having some projects at the ready, encouraging more of that in the future. They could be under $10,000 projects. It could be something that generally is a little bit smaller, but that we vetted them and we ultimately feel really good when we're able to pull something forward that we all agree has merit.
Yeah, really kind of the two edges of that, to try to smooth some of those barriers that may contribute to delays, while also having good backup options. Wonderful. So I'm not seeing any other hands. I might kind of turn to the board and kind of read through what folks have entered. If I get to something, an input you shared, or if it's something you just have some thoughts about or wanted to add some additional layers to, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you. So kind of on the results side, I'm seeing a lot of votes for fewer projects delayed than previous cycles. Kind of a acknowledgement that's probably something that may continue, but hopefully some of the interventions may help with that. We are able to fund new projects in the outer year of the TIP. Seeing some shifts in the rankings here as I read. Oh, and Josh.
Hey, folks, nice to see you all. Josh Ostrov with the MBTA. I wanted just to be able to share a lot of what we're talking about, what you're talking about today, with my team here, because we certainly, any projects we give you from the MBTA, we want those to be, thoughtful things that we know that we can turn around on time. So I have been in different, roles in my life, and I really appreciate the thought that's going into this and making sure that you have an orderly decision process. Few, if any, surprises. Certainly no unnecessary surprises, and so we would certainly commit to that. But I want to just make sure that it's okay within the spirit of, obviously this is a public meeting, but I want to just be able to share this with folks. So as we're pulling together our list starting later this month, might not be ready November 1st, that we are taking this into account. So as one submitter, this is super helpful. It's sort of like when you're applying for a job and how's my resume going to be scored? What keywords do I need? But there's more to it than that, because it's actually being able to execute. And where a lot of our stuff relies on municipal, partnerships or other, entities, then all the more important that we have our ducks in a row. Anyway, just taking up a little airtime. Sorry.
No, that was great. Thank you, Josh. It's good to hear. And I feel like just like a job application too, it's a conversation, and we're trying to find some good mutual fits. So
We just want to make it to the second round interview.
yeah.
Thanks.
Beyond. All right. Well, thank you. And yeah, I think continuing through in the results section, I think this statement is very similar to what Aaron and Eric was saying. We have some high scoring, well understood and supported projects to choose program in the outer tip years and also in the inner years. So kind of fewer unscored projects were discussed, considered, approved compared to previous cycles. So that's kind of, I guess, the flip side of that one. We've received several new high-scoring applications for the more traditional capital projects. Those are those core investments Ethan was speaking to, that where we've generally, the past few years, been seeing a decline. And we have a better handle on cost changes of projects as they progress through the tip from year to year, perhaps. And then there's a kind of some possible solutions here as well. So yeah, generally feeling like we have a good handle on things, and maybe not at the decision points, but earlier, so we have time to digest. So those were the results. But certainly feel free to continue adding. The board is open. And then in terms of the process, so kind of more like the way we're carrying out the work, we have, before votes, MPO board members feel they have ample opportunities to review information, ask questions, discuss alternatives and their implications. Certainly the Tipper is a venue we want to make a place for that, but I think we can maybe do some also thinking of other opportunities that may work for folks. We have the rationale for the MPO's board decisions about programming and delaying projects is clear, fair, and aligned with regional priorities and LRTP. We feel optimistic about the prospect of the TIP process improving year to year. And again, if anyone has things to add or related to any of these, please feel free to raise your hand. The Boston MPO and MassDOT could take an active role in getting municipalities to put forward designs for projects. Interesting. Many municipalities seem to lack the ability, knowledge to get many of these year-long projects in the pipeline. So perhaps maybe pointing to a process that feels more, not just like an application and who comes, but like how do we really use what we have to kind of project, point out opportunities and work collaboratively. And then we've figured out a better or more effective way to handle input from the public. Are we here to listen to proponents advocate for the project, and or those in opposition argue against it, or are we here to make sure the TIP is developed by the board is managed effectively? So kind of what is the how do we properly direct, give folks an opportunity to weigh in a way that feels helpful and is at the right time, perhaps. Thinking about tip development process gives us hope for our ability to tackle complex challenges facing the region. And we met in person more frequently, knowing that while burdensome in-person interactions help build connections, culture, and trust, and not just the high stakes milestones. Oh wow, we have more. Or final tip scenario development and votes. Yeah. Oh, Eric, sorry. Hope I didn't leave you hanging there too long.
Yeah, I was going to say on that comment about meeting in person, I do think that having at least one in-person meeting as we are kind of getting to a critical point for decision making, I think is really productive. I think it's very helpful to get folks there in the room together, have a good discussion. So I would definitely be an advocate for, getting that on the agenda as early as possible. And I know sometimes that's challenging because of the reserving the room with other, conflicting times, but I think that's very helpful.
Very helpful feedback. Thanks, Eric. And then we continue to document and visualize the calendar relationships between our TIP process and key inputs like MassDOT and the MBTA capital plans, and perhaps others in the federal and municipal side. Ooh, okay, yeah. So kind of have this, our TIP development process feels, more and more integrated with other related processes of how we get, projects done and change happening. Logan, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on the Boston MPO MassDOT taking maybe more of an active role in getting some designs in the pipeline. I think maybe going back to kind of the earlier conversation that was happening about the decreasing amount of applications too, I think maybe something that could be additionally considered in that context is the Boston MPO's decision some years back to require a 25% design to apply for TIP funding. And, as kind of was mentioned as an example, like Marblehead is currently, we're spending almost all of our Chapter 90 funding on, one of our project designs right now that we'd eventually look at for TIP funding. But it's kind of hard to explain to my peers right now kind of what the MPO is. And there's I was just at a North Shore Task Force meeting this morning. So, having the MPO come to those as they, annually do and kind of discuss projects that are coming up. Maybe, I don't know exactly how the MPO or maybe MassDOT could take a more active role, but that 25%, design standard is definitely one of those barriers to, I think, getting projects in and getting the ball rolling. And it could definitely, things like the design pilot as well too could definitely kind of help get that solved. But back to the point of just it's hard to understand how these programs work, and it's definitely not something you can just show up for one conversation and say I'm going to apply. So just trying to get people to understand that this is a long process and making sure that they thoroughly engage before they really get involved. And I think it would improve the ability of the MPO to kind of get a vision on what projects are coming up and what could be potentially on future TIP cycles as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Logan. I really appreciate that. I earlier the kind of 25% design threshold change had kind of popped into my mind as one of those other pieces in the mix of kind of why it is it's a hurdle for municipalities to get there. And that decision was taken based on the challenges we have had previously to project delay and cost increases and wanting to kind of make sure we really understood a project before it was programmed. And yet these things, it's all kind of a puzzle. And but certainly that is a requirement. How can we meet municipalities earlier, provide the encouragement and advice and mentorship to kind of get projects off the ground. Really appreciate that. All right. I'll go read through these relationship items again. Speak up if you'd like to add anything. The TIPper committee members feel comfortable asking questions during meetings and or reaching out to the chair and MPO staff offline. Been engaging municipalities that haven't been involved with the TIP process in the recent past. Connected definitely to Logan's comment. Municipalities feel confident engaging with the TIPper committee and proactively bringing matters to its attention via MPO staff. Absolutely. TIPper committee and the MPO board have a good relationship, effective communication with proponents of all projects, and especially those whose projects are facing difficulties or challenges. Absolutely. And then MPO members have confidence that the TIPper committee is in line with the board's overall priorities for the TIP and is making progress towards those priorities. And we're excited to spend more time working together and look forward to meeting virtually and in person. So yeah, I guess I'm seeing in that kind of overall column a lot of, desire for, comfort, familiarity, and kind of like everyone realizing we're all trying to work towards a similar goal, and kind of helping to bridge some of those gaps where folks might listen to one of these meetings and be like, oh my gosh, what is this process? And so that they know where ways to feel more approachable, and will like help them through it. Over to Len.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the public engagement part of the process here, because I really want to understand what that's supposed to accomplish at these meetings, because I really do want public input, but I think we need to make sure that we know what that's supposed to do at these meetings versus the board meetings. And at what points. So I would say maybe when we are discussing the outer years and new projects, then that could be a time for the public to weigh in on the value of their projects. So I'm kind of going on a little bit because I'm not quite sure where to land on this comment, but if you have a sense of what I'm getting at, maybe you or other people can comment on it. If not, I can try to explain a little better the question that I have about the purpose of public comments at these meetings.
Yeah, I think I might get it. Let me attempt to kind of describe what I think you're pointing at, and let me know if I'm off on base or not. I do think like this committee, the TIP process engagement readiness committee, I think the initial goal, from my understanding, was to be more about how we are conducting this process, and not necessarily to be a committee making decisions around the TIP. There was a point in last year's process where it became clear that we were going to have one of a number of projects would need to be delayed in order to hit fiscal constraint. And I think given some of the limitations and time at the MPO board itself, the board as a whole asked us to kind of hear from project proponents and kind of do some of that information gathering. So maybe is that, so I guess maybe if maybe we have some thinking to do around, like, do we want to keep, what is our stance? Do we want to keep this to be around the overall process, and really try to encourage project proponents to speak to the whole MPO board, since that's the board taking the ultimate decisions? Or are there, and in what cases would we take on more of a let's hear from folks ourselves? Yeah, is that kind of generally the scope that you're thinking, Len?
Yeah, and I think also, we just need to be clear about what kind of public input we want, and convey that to folks before the meeting, and certainly before the public comment period, so that they know, and then we can have meetings that accomplish what we are trying to accomplish at the meeting. So that's it. Thanks. I guess I'm simply saying, let us think that through and then communicate it, very clearly to everyone, so that everyone's on the same page at meetings. Thank you.
A lot of sense. Thanks, Len. And Erin.
Yeah, I put my hand up because just in sort of Len was saying, kind of what does this sound like, or do I have this right? But I I think what I also hear you saying, Len, is like the tipper meeting isn't the place for communities to come together and have their sort of their, kind of public arguments about the merits of certain projects. Like that is to be done, back at the municipalities or the agencies, whatever it is, to sort of come up with those, the merits of the project, and then the political leadership brings those forward. Certainly other comments can come forward. Maybe there are questions that have to go back to the community, but we don't want to be in the position here, with this committee of sort of managing that level of public comment. So I do think framing kind of what the comments are that we're looking for and kind of the appropriate place to bring those and at what time is a great comment, Len. So thank you.
A lot of sense. Thank you. I think it's all kind of solidifying, and I think this seems like something, Ethan, I see your hand up too. We can probably take a stab at tackling and share with this committee for kind of confirmation. Ethan.
Yeah, and I'll happily work with our communications and public engagement program members over here at the MPO to kind of raise that discussion. I think what it also gets to is some of the other comments that have been made here on this board around the relationship that the TIP committee has with its municipalities. And I think part of that, looking at trust, is the understanding of that when a project is programmed on the TIP, that MPO staff and MassDOT staff will work with the project proponent to make sure it moves forward. And part of that means navigating the public process around the project. Moreover, if a project is already on the TIP, that to some extent also demonstrates a level of public support, and the MPO programs projects that it already understands are worthy projects. Of course, a relationship is also one that goes both ways. So I think part of what we could discuss going forward at a future meeting is understanding as well, like, these are the commitments that the MPO makes. We also want to convey to municipalities, these are the expectations when you are on the TIP, going forward, how you should convey information about public comment, which was a major factor that we learned over this past TIP cycle, where it's like, sometimes the comment that is being submitted to the MPO board is not the universe of public comment and discourse around the project, for example. And the municipalities need to furnish MPO members with all perspectives about the project to make informed decisions. There's my spiel on that, but
That makes sense. And one other thing that came to my mind too is that I know last cycle, a great deal of the comments related to the difficult decision we had to take around which project to delay. My hope is we have fewer of that type of kind of unexpected and situation. However, if we did, I know we've had a conversation, and I know we flagged it for further conversation of potentially beginning to rescore projects that have been were scored under a previous mechanism, and that might provide a bit more of the criteria for us to be making these decisions without it needing to resort to a asking proponents to make the case before this committee or the MPO, because ideally we wouldn't. That probably isn't the best way to go about those things. Right. Does anyone have anything else to add in this point? If not, I do want to make sure we have time to shift back to Ethan to kind of go over the upcoming dates. I will say I'll keep this board open. So please feel free to add additional comments to it. I do hope to eventually use this in June, or have us all take a look at it again, see how we've done, kind of to what our aspirations were for the process.
Well, can I just add one other quick thing? Thanks for presenting this, or whoever proposed doing this. Thanks for it, because if nothing else, it got us thinking a little bit before the meeting. Those of us who had the opportunity to do so. So it almost hardly matters to me what type of interactivity tool that we use. I think as long as we kind of do something along these lines, it's great. So thank you, whoever came up with the idea.
Thanks, Lynn. I'm glad to hear you liked it. And I almost forgot. I will don't know, actually, am I allowed to share my screen? Maybe not. I will share that I realized that the last interactive exercise had a very cute like starfish associated with it. I did not have such a thing for this time. However, I do have some cute triangles to share with you, which will help if not. So, something to look forward to.
I look forward to the next polygon or polyhedra.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for that discussion. Of course, related to all that discussion around deliverables and other items and different touch points throughout the year, these next few slides are going to relate to just that. And of course, as Josh said at the very start of this meeting, we will make sure that all of these slides are available because there's going to be several graphics here that I'm sure members will want to refer to throughout the rest of the TIP development cycle. So if we can go on to the next slide, the item that many of the municipalities this year may be waiting for. This is the TIP application timeline. TIP applications are going to open up this year on October 28th and will close December 31st. One of the changes that MPO staff have made over the past few years is that in the interest of soliciting more projects and giving more time, we are doing a 2-month solicitation window for projects. This also helps to capture the next meeting of MassDOT's Project Review Committee, which I believe is scheduled on December 12th. I might be wrong on that. In order to ensure that additional projects that might be currently trying to move through the pipe, which I believe we have one of in District 4, can start to do so and be reviewed on a timely manner. I'll also reiterate, this is the application period for all applicants, so not just municipalities, but as previously mentioned, this is also the solicitation window. We're hoping for the majority of, if not all, of the transit projects for the MBTA, Metro West Regional Transit Authority, and Cape Ann Transportation Authorities. Midway through the application period, MPO staff will be hosting how-to discussions for all applicants on December 7th and 12th at 1 p.m. The first of these, if not the second as well, will be recorded for additional reference. One of the other items that I will also make note of here is that this is not the totality of everything that is going on between October to January, which I'll get to on the next slide, and that in the middle of December, we'll also have another event that is highly relevant to the project application process. These are the project readiness updates on this slide here. When I refer to project readiness updates, this slide is capturing the quarterly readiness updates, municipal readiness days, and the TIP readiness days. TIP readiness days is a MassDOT activity that MPO staff report back on, and it represents the current primary touch point that MPO members and also the public as part of the TIP development process has on the totality of all projects and their changes on the TIP. We want to foment that with more frequent touch points throughout the year, albeit smaller touch points for more focused projects. Municipal Readiness Days is an action in which MPO staff at the beginning of January, or rather mid-January, will be working with the MAPC subregions, though it will be an MPO-hosted event, to aggregate projects by subregion for municipalities to come to the MPO and report either any progress they are making on their projects or any difficulties they may be encountering. As part of the TIP readiness exercise over the past few years that I have been working here at the MPO, MassDOT has always solicited feedback on projects from MPO staff to allow the MPO to give their perspective on their understanding of the different projects. To provide their MPO staff's understanding of each of the different projects that are being evaluated for the readiness days. During these periods, MPO staff will be utilizing the municipal readiness days in order to solicit that information and give MassDOT more information than they historically have to really help to ensure that the MPO perspective on a project is better aligned with that municipal perspective. And of course, we will then report back to the MPO, and also MPO members and other members of the public are encouraged to attend these municipal readiness days to ensure that project updates are more well thought through in February, with these events happening in January to build in a bit of a lead time. Reason being, as we'll get to on a later slide, but I still have a couple more dates to cover here, TIP readiness days in February fall a little bit too close to scenario planning in March for there to be a full digestion and understanding of all of the different changes that can come forth. The quarterly readiness updates, like I mentioned earlier in this presentation, include the TIP readiness days as the TIP readiness days sort of February quarterly update. That is preceded in December, on December 19th, with a one quarterly update scheduled there. The next meeting of this committee will take place on the afternoon of December 19th. The reason being is that right now, for a tentative agenda, we are considering having December 19th also be a meeting to provide an update on several major capital projects that are funded in both the statewide highway programs and regional parts of the TIP. That is not confirmed yet, but that would be at the MPO board meeting, which is where most of these quarterly readiness updates happen, with additional smaller project updates happening on December 19th. That would also present an opportunity for any projects that are seeking to provide applications to this year's upcoming TIP to potentially indicate where they may be at and where their next critical milestone may be in advance of the scoring process. So again, kind of jumping back ahead, we have our December 19th quarterly update fomented by a TIP committee meeting, and similarly in February there will be another meeting of the quarterly update in the form of the TIP Readiness Days update, an MPO board meeting, and an as of yet unspecified time for the TIPper in-depth Readiness Days discussion there. The reason being is that we do not yet have a date, at least MPO staff do not yet know the date for the TIP Readiness Days exercise that MassDOT is conducting. Also relevant to TIP readiness updates, not to get too far ahead of ourselves here, I'll also direct attention up to May. There's something very important that happens between February and May, but in May we'll also have a draft TIP changes quarterly update as well. This reflects any changes that may be happening to programming for the TIP in between when it is released for a draft public comment and when the expected endorsement takes place in June. We can move on to the next slide. This helps to show what that event is in a little bit more detail that happens between February and June. This specifically is scenario development. Now, as with last year, there was a lion's share work being done here by members of this committee with very frequent meetings of the TIP committee on the off weeks in between semi-weekly meetings of the MPO board. We had a very successful outcome, I would say, or at least a pretty successful outcome in utilizing the TIP committee as a way of discussing in more detail different programming scenarios around the TIP this year. So we are tentatively identifying 2 meeting dates for the TIPper in March once again to have a meeting to discuss initial scenarios on March 13th at this committee before that initial programming scenario or scenarios are brought for consideration by the MPO board on March 20th. If the MPO board has further feedback, which is very likely, that would require adjustment, we would then use the March 27th meeting of the TIP committee to discuss those scenarios and adjustments there, culminating in, ideally, based on our current expectation of timelines, a final scenario vote on April 3rd, leading up to an April 17th draft for TIP release. Now, this is the kickoff of TIP development. There are plenty of different things that could happen over the next few months, so I'll take this opportunity to say that all dates that are listed here are subject to change, but this is the roadmap that we are looking to lay out today to take in some of this feedback. The idea here is that by having more frequent touch points with these quarterly readiness updates, we can capture and relay more information more frequently. By having a municipal readiness days that spans 3 events over 3 days, we can get the municipal perspective in before the readiness days happens, which means that we can be proactive in furnishing MPO members with that municipal perspective, while providing sufficient space in the form of the TIP committee and the MPO board to have better deliberation on what programming scenarios should look like, to better understand and differentiate between the different alternatives of projects and bundles being considered. Of course, like I just said, if the MPO does vote to release the draft TIP on April 17th, we would then spend the next month identifying any other changes that may need to take place, as further information may come in on the programming scenarios, and then relay that on May 15th before, if we go on the next slide, endorsement would take place. So the federal fiscal years 2026 to 2030 TIP will, as we've done over the past 2 years, include a 30-day public comment period that would likely start on April 21st and end May 21st. That is a full 30 days, and then we would use a May 22nd meeting of the TIP committee right after it to review some of the public comment we got around the TIP and also highlight some of the potential changes that may be taking place. So in addition to that meeting to discuss different readiness changes and updates there, if there is further discussion required on anything, for example, a project cost increase that may not have been identified yet, we would then also use that TIP committee meeting in May to help to identify that. Of course, June 5th is the expected date of the vote to endorse on the federal fiscal year 2026 to 2030 TIP. So with that, I know that is a lot of information. I'm going to summarize all of it now on the next slide. In the near term, for the items to consider closest, TIP applications are opening up at the very end of this month and will be open through the end of the calendar year. On November 7th and 12th, we'll have the TIP how-tos as well, which will circulate invitations for over the coming weeks, and we encourage prospective applicants to the TIP to attend, as we'll be discussing how the TIP applications work, how and when the MPO scores things, and when those scores will be explained to the MPO board. In December, or starting in December, although we're already really doing it now, all the way through February, MPO staff will be working with MassDOT to gather and discuss project readiness information. Something that MPO staff are going to work with the TIP committee and the MPO board on over the next few months, especially in December, is not only feeding what the content of that December quarterly readiness update and TIP committee meeting looks like, but also identifying projects not only that should be scored for this upcoming TIP that are new, but also, as was mentioned earlier, rescored. To kind of add a little bit more detail to that, there are several projects on the TIP right now, as early as 2025 and as late as 2029 on the TIP, that are using a scoring methodology that is a 134-point scale that was last employed, I believe, in 2019. We will likely start with those projects, but if there are other projects that through these readiness exercises that members or the MPO board would want to see MPO staff rescore, that is something we want to work out over these next few months. This way, come February and April, when readiness exercises are underway and scoring is nearing its conclusion, we can focus more on how we incorporate readiness information into the development of a project programming scenario. We're going to make sure that not only will these slides and all of those timeline graphics I provide become available, but that the TIP application documents, the revised scorecards that are going to be employed, and a full timeline of all of these events will soon be made available at the TIP development webpage, which is at www.ctps.org/tip-dev, DEV. So with that, if we go on to the next slide, I'll just cover some next steps. Again, the planned next meeting of the TIP committee is December 19th at 1 p.m. That is going to follow the December quarterly readiness update that we have tentatively planned. And again, that will be meant to provide additional information and context beyond or in addition to what is presented that morning. Again, that morning update may focus more on major capital project process, whereas the afternoon would likely be focused on some of the smaller project items that have emerged over the past few months. We'll be sure to provide members of this committee and the MPO board with more details and specifics as we near that date, as it will be the first MPO-led quarterly readiness update that we'll be deploying really under these new process improvements. So stay tuned. With that, thank you all very much, and I'm happy to field further questions on that.
Thank you so much, Ethan. And I do want to take the opportunity to just really express gratitude for Ethan, for MPO staff, for MassDOT, for the T. Like, you all are doing a lot to kind of really try to get ahead of some of the, the things we saw, the trends that Ethan's discussed earlier in this meeting. And I know it is, there is extra work involved there, extra coordination, and so it's very appreciated. Erin.
Yeah, thank you, and agree. Ethan, thank you for all of your work to sort of on this, but also last year synthesizing all of the projects. It's been really incredibly helpful to this committee and the work of the MPO. I wanted to ask the sort of TIP readiness days that DOT has, are they open to the public? And I think they haven't been in the past, and we've talked about that, kind of how sometimes that shifts things. And is that something where staff have attended in the past, or is it new that you might be able to participate in those going forward?
To my understanding, they are not open to the public. However, the role of the MPO in this case would be to make sure that municipal perspectives around the projects can be incorporated. The municipal readiness days are going to sort of be a two-way street in that regard, where not only are municipalities very strongly encouraged to attend to provide their perspectives, but MassDOT staff may also be present. We're going to be working with the districts and highway division to make sure that MassDOT staff MassDOT staff are there too. And during those municipal readiness days, if a municipality comes and says, hey, we're having difficulty getting comments back on our 25%, we will then relay that and work with the highway districts to make sure the project manager knows that, and that we can then make sure the MPO board is aware that progress is being made. I think one of the key things that came out of a lot of the discussions that this committee had and the MPO board had around project readiness last year is that the real nugget of information that is being sought is usually what is the critical path forward for the project, what is the next milestone for design, and how does that municipality intend to get there. I think that was the big item for the federal fiscal year 2027 projects. I think that will be what guides a lot of the discussion at these readiness meetings. I'll also note too, just to reiterate something because I did not mention it during this meeting, these quarterly readiness updates are also going to be really driven the December, May, and then any later ones that would also take place would be driven by MPO members and members of this committee, as due to time constraints, we don't have time to review all 70 projects that are in the regional target program at the tip. But if there are items of particular concern, maybe they may have been flagged for risk, maybe they've seen repeated cost increases and delays, then that list of key projects or priority projects would also be cultivated and informed by discussions of this group as well. So we invite everybody, but there will also be a priority listing of these are the ones we think might need some additional help to keep moving.
Thank you, Ethan. And so just to clarify, it sounds like staff is going to be having kind of its own, developing its understanding of with MassDOT of some projects that we might want to keep an eye on, but also it's kind of a little bit of a homework assignment for us too, is to be paying attention and flagging things that we'd like, staff to take a close look at, or whatever rumblings we've been hearing.
Yes, and to also give MassDOT some credit here too, the Readiness Days exercise is a statewide exercise over multiple days for all MPOs, and while staff present the net impacts to the regional target program, it also includes updates and changes to the statewide highway program as well, which we do not often present on. So that is kind of one of those other cases there where it is sort of all hands on deck for MassDOT. We want to make sure that MPO staff are doing the work to kind of provide additional insight, lighten the load there, and convey more information into and out of that whole process as well.
Thank you. Understood. All right. Anyone have any questions? Does anyone want us to kind of flip back through the slides about anything? We will be distributing these slides afterwards as well. So we'll have access to kind of those key milestones that you can put into your calendars. Moment. Well, hearing none, I might move to oh gosh.
So, sorry, Jen, I meant to say this earlier, but I spaced out on it. Folks might be interested. I'm sure everyone will be at the Moving Together conference, and there's a lot of great stuff to choose from. Laura Gilmore, our Senior Director of Strategic Transit Planning, and Jonathan Church with MassDOT and I will be panelists at a session on the PMT, Program for Mass Transportation, and the MBTA strategic plan, and I'll be talking about our developing approach to capital strategy and how we want to have a better informed lens on both our short-term and long-term capital planning. And I know everyone here will find it interesting if you're able to attend. So just wanted to pitch because, we're on commission.
Thank you. No, that's perfect.
At these conferences. So
that was actually the next item on the agenda was members items, and so this is a perfect example of a members item. So thank you.
A non-member, but yes, thank you for letting me jump in.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Absolutely. I plan to be at Moving Together and see any other members items. Don't have any in mind myself, but Brad.
Jen, I'm sorry. Like many of you, I'm now in 2 meetings. Apologies if this was raised. At last week's full board meeting, there was a discussion that has some real relevance to some of the process improvements that we are describing, and it had to do with a mid-cycle tip amendment for a large project that has not yet been scored, that we all believe in at the regional level, and yet is ill-defined at this moment. And so I guess I just want to use this members items moment to ask, has there been additional follow-up between relevant parties, state agencies, regional agencies, municipal agencies, to make sure that the full board is given a meaningful opportunity to continue that discussion next time?
Taken. I see your hand.
Well, John, I don't want to jump in. I don't know if you had anything to say
sorry.
on that. I do know, I can say that just that I know that we took that back after the last board meeting from an agenda setting perspective, looking forward. And so, you know, David Mueller as the chair is committed to working with the board's request to get more information at the table at the full board meeting. So I don't have any specific time frame for that yet. I think that follow-up is just starting. But again, if John, if you have anything more to say, please do.
I didn't have anything more on that topic taken, so I don't want to take that from you. I had one other item I was just going to bring as we were wrapping up.
Okay,
So-
thanks, Jen.
Yeah, we'll
Thanks,
come
Tegan.
back.
I'm satisfied. It was just a commercial to make sure that the right folks are having conversations so we don't have the same full board meeting again. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
At the risk of opening myself up to another 3,000 emails a day, or more than 3,000 that I currently get, seems that way. You know, if there's anyone, and I don't do this just with Boston region, I offer this to all of the MPOs and TPOs in the Commonwealth. If there is a project that is stuck, if you don't know where it is, you can always reach out to me. I do set myself up for a ton of communication, making that offer. I don't do it lightly because I know that, you know, sometimes we have processes that could get stuck and need to move it beyond one point or to see the bigger picture and try to broker, you know, a deal or a compromise on something. So I do offer that to this group as well as I do through our planning office to the other MPOs and TPOs in the Commonwealth. If there's a problem, if you cannot find something out, don't hesitate to drop me an email, give me a call, and I will get you the grim news if it's grim, or the updates to say this is where it's stuck and we're trying to move it along. So appreciate any time to try and move our all projects along, to tell you the truth. So that's all I had, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate that. And I'm amazed at your degree of communication that you always let me know if you're going to be late for the meeting or anything like that. So on top of the 3,000 emails you get, I appreciate it. So yeah, very key and consistent collaborator with all of our municipalities as we move forward in the process. All right. I'm if there's any other member items. If not, I will briefly share a, as promised, triangle mascot. Did that go through? And also I will ask for if anyone would like to motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll motion to adjourn. I have to remember the acute triangle. I'm going to use that when I get home.
Second.
All right. Second, I believe this meeting is adjourned. Great evening, everyone.
Excellent. Right, good night.